If I can, let's go to Justice Scalia. I think in the past you've advocated a constitutional interpretation called originalism, in which the meaning of a constitutional provision is determined based on the provision's meaning in 1789. And you have also said that government, even at the Supreme Court level, is a practical exercise, and that, well, let me just say what I'm trying to think. In other words, that the Constitution should be interpreted for its meaning at its origin. And Justice Breyer, you have taken the position that the Constitution is a living document, and therefore it adjusts to times and changes within this government, within the time period. Could each of you give us your legal interpretation of that and how you approach it?
You start. I started last time.
It's not quite as starkly different as is sometimes painted.
It's pretty.
I mean, yeah, because it's pretty different. All right, I tend to think that the values, as I say in the Constitution, you have to go back and find out those values. They haven't changed a lot. The fact that freedom of expression was important in the Enlightenment, it was. So is freedom of religion. So were a lot of those things. And those are the values that underlie the word liberty, etc. But in my own view, to use sort of a slightly rhetorical example, which I did, George Washington was not aware of the Internet. I mean, I think we agree on that. And so most of our job is applying those values, which don't change very much, to a world that changes a lot. And the freedom of speech, those words don't explain themselves. They don't tell you how they're going to apply to a really tough case, where the Internet wants to communicate something that's of private information about an individual. Which is it? The right of privacy, or is it the right of expression that predominates there? Very hard. And so if I had to incorporate in 4 words, I'd go back to a judge who was in the 18th century. I found it in Gordon Wood's book, in Connecticut, near Rhode Island, right. But in Connecticut, who said, Root, I think his name was, and he says, the American tradition of judging involves prudence and pragmatism, reasonableness and utility. Well, I think those are elements of an effort by a judge in a difficult case to work out how those ancient values apply to modern circumstances.
I have no problem with applying ancient values as they were understood at the time to new modern circumstances. Originalism doesn't mean that the radio is not covered by the First Amendment. Of course, you have to apply the text of the Constitution to new phenomena. But what originalism suggests is that as to those phenomena that existed at the time, the understanding of the society as to what the Constitution prohibited at that time subsists. For example, the death penalty. Now, there are good arguments for and against the death penalty. Is it prohibited by the Eighth Amendment? For an originalist, the answer is easy. Of course it isn't, because it was the only penalty for a felony when the Eighth Amendment was adopted. Nobody thought that the death penalty was prohibited. It continued to be used in all the states. Nonetheless, I've sat with 4 colleagues, all off the court now, who thought the death penalty is unconstitutional. That's the difference, essentially, between a living Constitution approach and an originalist approach. Of course I will apply, and when I apply the original values, I apply it as those values were understood by the people who adopted that amendment, so that I look to see what they thought was prohibited and try to carry that forward to these new phenomena. That's the basic difference between originalism and the living Constitution. I don't trust myself to be a good, what should I say, a good interpreter of what modern American values are. You people are much better at that than I am. I have very little contact with with the American people, I'm sorry to say. And you do, and the members of the House probably even more. So if you want to keep the Constitution up to date with current American values, you ought to decide what it means, and you could, kiss us goodbye.
Thank you.